those who purport to love numbers with their biblical numerology, they've been telling us, what's the day of 12? They've been telling us for 12 days that God is going to birth something. 9, a birthing is possible because you're fruitful. 9 is the number of fruitfulness. Galatians 5. 9 is the number of fruitfulness. And by extension, it is a number of birthing. And so we have to be fixed in purpose, firmly persistent, at all times excelling in God's business, knowing that our attempts, our earnest efforts at godliness are not without gift, are not without effect, are not for nothing, that they are not fruitless, that we are bearing fruit when we attempt to do like God, when we attempt to be like him, we're bearing fruit.
Well, someone would say, well, what does that look like? Because when we're saying we're doing the work of the Lord, most people think of this big thing. It always has to be this big thing. But when we really recognize that your life is really the work of the Lord.
Yes.
And so people don't recognize that is, and I think to give some context of how we came up with this, our discussion began of our plans in life have not turned out to be our plans. It has turned out that when we are walking this journey in life, we have discovered in our conversation, we discovered that not going to say everything, but the majority of the things that we had planned in our mind did not work the way we had planned. But then when we settled in God's plan, which is God's work.
Yes. Yes.
That's where the managing of getting into the discussion of managing the highs and lows came, because in our discussion we were sharing with each other, oh, I had plans about this, and I thought I was going to be in this place, and I thought I was going to be doing this thing, and I thought I was going to be doing that thing, and that's not how it turned out. But then accepting, okay, what I am doing is more of God's plan for my life, and me not fighting against that plan is where this begins, is being steadfast and being immovable, because whether I'm in the high or whether I'm in the low, we had this discussion the other day, is when we're in the low, we automatically blame that on the devil, and it ain't always the devil. And so this is why we wanted to let you into our conversations, because these revelations begin to unfold as we're just having we get together and we have conversations and we catch up about life, and then we begin to talk about, the things that God has spoken to us in the midst of whatever it is, whether it was a high place or whether it was a low place, even in the midst of sometimes, I think I shared with her the other night, is I got a job making the most money that I have ever made in my life. Never thought that I would be making this much money. And then 4 days after I started, I had a car wreck. A high and a low. And my immediate response was I was shaken. A strong sense of shame came over me. And I had never felt that powerful. It was just like powerful. But then I had to recognize, I stood on that street, because the wreck was my fault. And so when I stood on that street, God was sending people. Even in the midst of the wreck, the guy just stopped and was like, are you okay? And telling me, he was like, he said, my wife just bought this exact same vehicle yesterday, no miles on it, and drove it off the lot and had a wreck. Message. Guys were saying it was okay. This is okay. You're okay. I hit the other guy and people were stopping, checking on me. They weren't even talking to the guy. And I'm like, I hit him. But I had to recognize that in this low, and I'm looking at my truck, God was still in the midst. So this was not a devil thing.
Right. Right. One of the things that came up in the conversation this week was, and Yolanda said this, we get unraveled because we make plans. I mean, we have a come apart.
Yes.
Because we were so committed to the plan we decided was God's. Yeah. Or he spoke, and we took that word,
and we made it out. We made it something that he didn't intend for it to.
Then we made a beautiful vision.
We packaged it.
We put it on a board.
We even presented it to people.
We cut it out by faith. We said it was God.
Yes.
Yes. And then there's an attack on it. And then we say, all is lost. Like the 10 men from the Wiz. Yeah. All is lost.
And we have a fit in that all is lost.
Oh, we have a good fit.
We have a good temper. Like my grandbaby is, you just took something for her and she screams like you just killed her. That's how we do, but God, you told me I could have this, or I could do this, or I was going to be doing this, and I was going to be in this place. And yeah. He may even say, well, I may have said that, but I didn't say that. It's not in the plan right now, because we got to think about, even when we're building a house or a structure, there is phases. And you can't do, this is where this PMP comes for me, is you can't do, there's downstreams and there's upstreams effects. And so if you do the wrong thing at the wrong time, you affect everything else. And we don't look at that in our life.
Wow. And I think that's a powerful thing when we talk about managing the highs and lows, because one of the things we talked about this week was managing is not about letting life happen to us or constantly being on the defensive.
No.
Managing the highs and lows is very much about being on the offensive. And that's not necessarily, that's going to look different for all of us, I guess I'll put it that way.
Right.
But I think when we unravel because our plans don't come through like we thought they should, what we won't admit it in our conscious mind, but what we are subconsciously making an agreement with is a lie that says, I was born again with all the faith I need, instead of being stretched in faith, instead of growing in grace and in our knowledge of God.
Because there's always an evaluation in growth.
Always. There's always a testing time.
Growth.
Yeah, there's always a testing time. There's always, we feel it, because when we're receiving from the Lord, those periods of time, days or weeks or months even, we're receiving from the Lord. We're having dreams. We have understanding. The word is literally popping up off the pages of Scripture. We are moving at, it's like a fast track, and we feel so alive and we feel so energized.
But what we're not preparing for is when he gets silent and quiet and it's in the low.
Right, and it's time to apply.
Yeah, because but we don't realize that's what he's doing in that time. Because we on the mountaintop. It's like, oh, God spoke to me, and you just feel all this stuff, and then all of a sudden, because he's preparing you at that time for what's to come.
Yes. Yes.
But we are not thinking that in that moment, and that's how we get unraveled.
Yes.
And that's how we don't manage the highs and lows, and I think I've trained myself in this is, okay, when all of this thing has happened, what's about to hit? I originally thought that it was me being negative. But it was, no, there's a mechanism that you always have to be prepared for that tide to turn. Because then that's where you're going to be stretched. How are you going to react to this?
I think this is a good place to segue into our testimony time.
Right.
You want to go first, or you want me to
go? I'll go first.
Okay.
I was sharing with Shaunta, and this is how we got in the conversation, is about when I travel with my parents. during a certain holiday, I always come home with an evaluation of something that I want to change. So this one particular year, it was 2016, we had Christmas with my family, and I came home determined to change a lot of things with me. And so it was with my health, it was weight loss, it was all of this. I went through at least, I think, 9 months of a peacetime. I mean, when I say an unbelievable peace, it was just like, I had never experienced this type of peace in my life. I lost 50 pounds. It just was like, and I had developed this thing is nobody is going to disturb my peace. If something knocks on my door to disturb my peace, I am slamming the door in that thing's face. That was my mindset. Not knowing. Oh, and to add segue is that is my husband and I were empty nesters, and we had all of these, I mean, things were just like going good for us. We were paying bills off, had the whole thing of becoming debt free. We had this plan. We were about to travel. We were about to do this thing. I mean, we just had our plans, I'm telling you. And got a phone call in September, and my daughter told me, she said, "Mom, I'm pregnant." And I said, okay. And I got off the phone and I said, "Lord, I do not want to raise another child. That ain't in my plan." And so, needless to say, when my daughter had the child, there was drugs in the baby system. So we know what comes after that, CPS. I didn't know that I was about to be in the fight of my life. And didn't know that God had given me all of this peacetime to prepare myself. And Shaunta was there and she watched it. When I say, not to go into the great details, but I'm just going to say that I had to end up hiring an attorney, fighting CPS and my daughter for my grandchild. I had to defend my character in court. There was all kind of lies that had been told on me. I mean, I was the scum of the earth, and I didn't know where that came from. My daughter had told people that I was dead, so they were shocked when I showed up. Just all kind of things. And me and my husband looked at each other, and we were like, we are about to be 50 years old, starting completely over, because when we finally got custody of my grandchild, she was 2 months old. And here I am, getting up at night with a 2-month-old. And we were looking at each other saying, this was not our plan. This was not our plan. This is not our plan. And Shaunta was just ecstatic. And I'm looking at her like, you are lost your mind. She just thought it was the greatest thing on earth. And I'm thinking, no, this ain't great. Because I'm starting completely over. Oh, I didn't add that God had given me a job working from home, not knowing that this was not for my benefit. I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I'm making good money. I'm working from home. In my pajamas every day. Just all of this, not knowing that this was God's plan. Also, I didn't add that I had met a woman at another church that I went to, not knowing that she was going to end up being my granddaughter, and I ministered to her. And we both ended up leaving that church, not knowing that this woman was going to end up being my granddaughter's babysitter when I needed it. And so when we talk about plans and managing the highs and lows, settling in my plan, like I said, me and my husband were about to do this thing. We were about to, and that some of that has not changed, because God has allowed us to still travel, not as much as we decided to, but His plan for us to give my granddaughter a opportunity in life, and nobody else could do that but us. That's right. But I can say for the first 2 months, I was angry. I was really. And I really had to deal with that with God. I really had to talk to him because I kept saying, this is not my plan. I was blaming everybody else, my daughter, everybody else. But really, when it comes down to it, in our discussions, and you said it again the other day, and I said, God, I needed that reminder again, that there is purpose in my granddaughter that only my husband and I. And my husband told me one day, he said, you know, babe, he said, there's a reason why God had us get full custody. Because at first we just got custody and CPS just had to relinquish her to us. And we didn't have papers. And then some other events occurred to where the attorney was like, no, it's time for you guys to have actual custody of her, that you have her till she's 18 or till whenever. And so my husband says there's a reason for this. We may not fully understand, but settling in God's plan is, okay, we had all these plans, but that's not God's plan. That was never his plan.
I want to point out some details in here, because during these months of peacetime, you had several physical pains or challenges that dropping that weight took care of.
Oh, yeah.
Creating a discipline of, because when I tell y'all, Yolanda was an intermittent fasting nut. Yeah, and I still do it.
I still do it, but I don't do it to the extent, I mean, because my family was like, you have gotten too small. This, people were like, this is crazy. But I didn't really do it for the weight loss stand, but the health stand, because I was having gallstones, I was having heartburn, not sleeping. It was just a whole different, and when I started the health thing, I was determined not to go and have surgery. Not if I could help it.
Right.
And so I started doing these cleanses and just finding out intermittent fasting and just changing a lot of things. During the peacetime, there was a lot. Somebody's trying to hang on. During the peacetime, there was a lot of instructions. But I also shared with Shaunta that I'm a stress eater, and in the stressful times, I cannot eat and gain weight. So I thought about the size that I would be had I not lost the 50 pounds before all of this occurred. Yeah. And so I've gained about 25 back. And people tell me I look more healthy.
She's good at fly, y'all.
But I thought about this. I could have gained 50 pounds on top of the unhealthiness that I was going through the stress of having to go to court and fight, and then having this baby and not getting, because you got to think about, for 9 months, I was getting some good sleep. I would even take my lunch during the day and take me a nap. So it was, but God was preparing me, and it was almost like I was pregnant, because you think about 9 months, and then I end up with this baby.
We hadn't covered that one.
We hadn't even come to that one. That just see how revelation comes out of our discussion. But to think about
it does precursor. It does precursor. Let me add some other things about Yolanda's process, because another thing in that peacetime, it was also a time of renewal. Yes. I would call it, because that was after leaving a church, a local church. And there was a lot of hurt to let go of from that situation. And all of that was in there together. And I want to tag this with 1 Corinthians 15:58 and Proverbs 14:23, that where we've covered about staying in our lane, abounding in the business of the Lord, abounding in the place or the task where the Lord has employed you. And during that time, it was all about wholeness for you.
Yes.
It was all about wholeness. And I mean, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, it was all about wholeness.
Oh, that's when I changed my hair.
Yes.
Yeah, that was when I did this whole hair thing. It was just a whole transformation.
Yes. And then and I want to encourage people with that, because this may not be your story, but the elements of it, when we stay in our lane, we meet who we need to meet when we need to meet them. Investing in relationships, even if they aren't reciprocal. The Bible says, Proverbs 14:23 says, in all labor there is profit. And I remember that conversation where you were like, I could not believe I ran into this sister again.
Right.
And she's, certified in caring for children.
Right, because when it came time for, I was like interviewing people, to taking my granddaughter and meeting people and seeing how she would react around them, and I was doing all of that, and then there was this reminder. And so I initially reached out to her and she didn't respond. And I was like, okay, because I reached out to her in Facebook and she didn't have Messenger and I didn't know it. And something happened to where she just sent me a text one day. And I was like, oh my God, are you still keeping kids? And she was like, yeah. And I said, I need to bring my granddaughter. And she was like, sure. Now I'm going to say caveat this. I kind of think that may be a little bit of a mistake because she's spoiling the mess out of my grandchild. But I can feel comfortable every day knowing that my grandchild is loved, which is another testament of God's plan, because God would have never placed this woman in my life. And he knew that she needed somebody with the experience of the traumatic events that my granddaughter had went through. So she's also experienced in that. And so she's very calm and very mild-mannered. And so my granddaughter needs that. She needs that steadiness, and she needs to be able to feel loved.
I think the other piece of that is you talking about the 9 months. And it's like, you know what? It was like being pregnant, resting, but it was, those 9 months were the epitome of self-care, because you just dove in. You dealt with the hard stuff. There were a couple of friction moments with your brother. She dealt with hard stuff, all to be able to have an environment for the little one. And I think that's what's so neat, that all of that benefited you, and now it's benefited her. Because when I saw her this week, I could not believe that kid. She's grown and she's so happy.
Yeah, she is. She is. She's very happy.
And in that, how many people do we know, or is it you or I? How many of us have our highs and lows come up and down from them without any understanding? It's a miserable.
That's the importance to come out with understanding.
Yeah, it's a miserable existence to get on the mountaintop and not see the value of the valley,
right?
Or get into the valley and not apply the lessons from the mountaintop. It's a very miserable place to be, because then you are in cycles.
Well, God even showed me this, that because there's going to be a sense of an abandonment for her, because it's natural to want to have your natural mother. And although her natural mother is still in her life, there's going to be a testament that I fought for you. I can always say to her, I fought for you. I fought anybody I needed to. This means that you were wanted. There's no need to have that abandoned feeling. And that comes later in years. But that discussion is, you were a child that was fought for on purpose. And we fought hard. Mm-hmm. There's a testament to that, because, even with the discussions with her mom at times, I'd be like, this child, I would fight you to the death for this child. Not knowing why I felt so strongly about that, because my thing was, when I wanted to be a grandparent, is you get them when you want them. That's a grandparent. I get you when I want you, and I spoil you, and then I send you back. But in this sense, she's going to have her mother in her life without a shadow of doubt. I'm going to do that on purpose. But the thing is there's going to be questions, because now her mother has another child that's actually with her. And there's going to be these type of questions of why. And so we're going to have these discussions, but God giving me these understandings to be prepared for that. because the conversation could go a whole nother way.
It really could.
It could go a whole nother way. And so I agree with you. It's important to come to get understand. That's how you manage the highs and lows, is to get the understanding. Okay, while I'm in this high, what am I supposed to be learning in this high to prepare me for when the valley comes? Because there's always going to be a valley.
Yes.
There's always going to be the valley. Because the word says, yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death?
It's in there.
It's in there. What is that telling us? To know.
Yeah. It's actually, we could parallel that. Yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death? I am with you. My rod and my staff, they comfort. And, we can parallel that with the New Testament saying it was just here. It was just here. Right there. Valley of the shadow of death.
I will fear no evil either.
I know, right? It'll come back to me. I had a New Testament parallel in my head, but it'll come back to me. And so we also made mention about in managing the highs and lows and developing emotional discipline. That means creating that balance and submitting to the will and to the plan of God. And so I want to tell a little bit of so we pre-planned what our stories were going to be. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the doctoral process because I had so many people who were excited for me for enrolling. And my mother from day one, I got home from the first day of orientation. And my mother says, "Hey, doctor." And I'm like, "Ma, I just enrolled." She was like, "That's all right. 3 years from now, you're going to be a doctor." And every day, it was, "Hey, doctor, hey, scholar. How's it? Hey, doctor, hey, scholar." Every day, I'm not exaggerating, every day. That's what she said. And it was fuel, and I worked full time. And I took these classes. I used up all my PTO for our required seminars in person and finished. Defended in June, participated in commencement in August. I am Dr. Scroggins. Yes.
Amen.
And everybody's very excited about that. And I was warned about the come down, but I underestimated the come down. And I thought this was a good example of highs and lows, because another thing that many of us in our day-to-day with fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, our interaction is we rarely know people who finish. We know a lot of people who start and stop and start and stop. But rarely do we meet a person who finished. We only talk about finishing at funerals and people finishing their race and finishing their course and quoting Paul. But it is possible to finish the business of the Lord, to abound and excel and increase in excellence and finish a thing. But I wasn't prepared for the low. So here's what happened. I graduate and people are like, "I want to take you out to dinner." And I'm like, "Can we do dinner from my bed?" "Hey, I want to go and I want to take you out. Can I do that from my bed?" Because I graduated and then I went back to work. And everything was a task, everything extra. "Hey, will you call this person?" It just felt like such a big deal to do. Everything was such a weight. And my soul was tired. And I had to sleep. And so it's like, "Well, Shaunta, did you do this?" "No, I haven't made it to it yet." "Shaunta, I sent you a text." "Yeah, I got it." "Yeah, Shaunta, did you respond to the email?" No, I got it. I read it. And everything made me tired. Everything made me tired to do. And so I had a talk with a big sister in the faith, Apostle Carlene Gaines. And one of the things she said to me was, "Enjoy this time of rest and recovery, but let me warn you," and it was by the Spirit of the Lord. It was great advice, great counsel. She said, "Your prayer time, everything is going to look different. Let the Lord rebuild it for you. Prayer time, devotional time, study time, reading for pleasure even." Anybody who knows me knows I love to read. And I was so excited because I bought, over the course of the 3-year program in school, I may have purchased about 30, 40 books that I wanted to read. And I was like, yeah, I get to read for pleasure. When I graduated, I could not read past a couple of pages I just didn't have the focus. I couldn't do anything but binge watch Netflix. And I was like, Lord, I'm going to have big girl problems if I just lay here and watch Netflix. And it was disturbing that all I could do was watch PBS and Netflix and eat gelato. And so it was a bad situation. And slowly, but we talked about submitting. Right. You know, I had plans. I got invited to be an adjunct professor. And I couldn't even be prepared for August because I was so tired. I underestimated how tired I was. It was a great high, great accomplishment. My mother's even convinced I'm going back for another doctorate. We're not yet agreed on that. But it is